I'm quite interested in your previous career in stolen vehicle recovery. Does that mean you have in-depth knowledge about how to successfully steal a car?
Maybe.
So yes. If it doesn't work out at Geotab, there's always something to fall back on, Aaron. My guest today is a recognized leader in sustainable innovation, recently named to the Green Fleet 100 most influential list. Aaron Jarvis is the Associate Vice President for EMEA at Geotab, the world's largest commercial telematics company. With a deep background in the IoT space, including senior roles at Vodafone, Aaron is the man responsible for translating global data insights into practical growth strategies for fleets across Europe. From helping organizations like United Utilities/Emissions to launching the next generation of generative AI assistants, he is at the heart of the industry's digital recalibration. Aaron, welcome to the show. I'm going to get straight into it with the first question. You've said that sustainability and cost savings must go hand in hand. Why do so many fleet managers still view the green squeeze as a cost burden rather than a margin opportunity?
Yeah, really good question. And I think it's one that we're asking ourselves a lot across the industry. I think it comes from this kind of green mandate started a few years ago in the middle of COVID or just out of COVID. So I've spoken a lot publicly about this looming CEO that fleet managers have that set a sustainability target during COVID. And it said, we have to reduce the amount of carbon we're emitting during a period where many vehicles weren't on the road, and setting that as the benchmark to come down. So I think broadly it comes from the target feeling a little bit unachievable. So then, you just get into a negative cycle of thinking, it's just an impossible thing and it's all green. Whereas actually what we're finding now, we're kind of coming through that a little bit, and especially in essentially what is a fuel crisis, you can really see how you can put a green transition or an electric vehicle transition hand in hand with greater profitability, essentially, or risk mitigation. So today in the UK, most fleets still have most of their fleet being an ICE vehicle. And suddenly you're seeing that the cost of fuel rising dramatically. If they were further ahead in that journey, that would be less of a risk to their business because they'd be using more electric vehicles. Broadly, it just comes from a starting point that was relatively perceived as negative, and a lot of kind of negative bias towards electric vehicles. I think probably come a bit from the media and a bit from people's concerns. But I think we're coming through it now, I would say.
It's quite interesting. You mentioned the conflict now, obviously with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. The impact of that and the interest in electric vehicles has been quite intense, isn't it?
Yeah. If you're running a business which is very dependent on fuel, which is most of our customers, the cost of fuel rocketing gets very serious for you. And now looking at, if we'd 5% more of our fleet was electric vehicles, the actual net cost of running those vehicles would be significantly lower now that fuel cost is higher. So a lot of our customers are really accelerating that transition, or should I say, the business case behind that transition suddenly makes a lot more sense to them.
You recently launched Geotab Ace, a generative AI assistant that lets managers ask natural language questions. How does moving from static dashboards to a conversational interface change the way business reacts to a sudden spike, as we were just saying, with the Iran war?
Everyone's discovering the upcoming of AI. You can suddenly get all of the information you want in the format that you want it without relying on people to build those dashboards for you. So what we're seeing is our customers are able to interact with the kind of facts that they want much more naturally. My fuel costs rising, which vehicle is the most at risk for that? It would be a good example. So very quickly you can go from a question to the insight that you need. Which vehicles could I swap around in my fleet? Maybe I've got 10 electric vehicles and 10 diesel vehicles. You can quickly see which could one of those vehicles swap and save you a lot of money because the routes or the amount of fuel that they're burning. And that probably a year ago would have taken an analyst to get into the data, or the fleet manager themselves downloading things and messing around with files. But actually now you can just ask the question and get the output. Everything that's happening in the world and in the media around how great AI is and all these use cases really applies quite directly to a fleet manager, because there's tons of data within a fleet on a fuel card from the vehicle, what the employees are doing, that can very quickly be pulled together to make an insight. So we're seeing tons of traction with it. And then arguably more importantly, being able to link that into other systems. Increasingly, businesses want to run their business on AI, and we've put a lot of work into making that model accessible to other large language models. If your business is using Copilot or Gemini, we can link them together very easily. So now the CFO never needs to look at any kind of fleet platform. Just in the interface that they're using, they can get the answers that they want. So it's pretty impressive, and it's a nice part of the industry to be working in because it feels quite futuristic at the minute.
We were talking earlier off camera about how much we both enjoy AI, but are the fleet managers digging into it?
Yeah.
Is there a reluctance there?
It's a real mix. So I think I was fortunate to join the industry, or Geotab was fortunate to come into the UK at a real turning point, and this is probably true globally. I think we're seeing a younger generation of fleet managers that's maybe more tech native, and that really started 6 or 7 years ago, coming into the industry and leaning more heavily into modern technology. And that's come at a kind of a perfect crossroads with the application of AI. And because Geotab's really on the forefront of that, we see a lot of those fleet managers that are a bit more tech savvy and forward looking, leaning into our product. And then we see big businesses, British Gas is a good example, who are looking outside of the fleet industry for leaders that, again, are more on the transformative side of things, and bringing in leaders that might look at different technologies that someone that's been in the industry 25 years, it's a little bit embedded in the way of working, might lean into. I think we've been lucky that the UK industry is quite forward looking, and you can see in a lot of the large fleets now that people have been put in place that are really leaning into the innovation side of things.
Geotab data shows that the UK EV maturity is at nearly 11%, significantly ahead of North America. What can the rest of the world learn from the UK's approach to the ZEF mandate and the infrastructure planning?
Looking at the different regions that Geotab operate in, notably North America, the UK really is a decent way ahead, primarily in charging infrastructure. So it's a lot easier for fleets to make the transition when the objection that you won't be able to charge the vehicle during the day is handled. And then also the charging industry in the UK rose quite quickly. There were hundreds of charge point operators, lots of people that you could get a home charger from. And the fleet industry in the UK has invested quite heavily in that. So I think we ran some studies in the last couple of years looking at how many drivers of vans park their van at home, as an example. And some of the largest fleets in the UK are 40 to 50% of vans parked at home. The fact that those businesses could get home charging points for their fleets has been something that's driven that forwards. And then just generally the investment in doing so. We've got a lot of customers that are involved in Innovate UK funding as well for electric trucks, as an example, which is quite a big investment by the UK government. And I think the UK's lent into electric vehicles quite quickly relative to other countries. There's some famous people in the industry that lean into that. You've got organizations like the EV Cafe, all these different groups that have sprung up to advocate for it. The fully charged events, it's just a lot of positive things happening. Whereas when I go to some other countries, it's really, we're not anywhere near there.
Do you think that reluctance or slowness with the adoption in North America is political, cultural?
Cultural, maybe. I think some of the challenges are a little different. So in Europe or in the UK specifically, big customers want to buy from sustainable businesses. So you see telcos and lots of other businesses having sustainable buying policies. You see the business case element. Fuel is considered, even before the crisis, an expensive commodity in Europe and especially the UK. If you compare that to North America, I think just broadly as a culture, sustainability is not such a big thing. And the cost of fuel isn't considered such a huge commodity.
So just anecdotally, just parting from the agenda a little bit, was it difficult to convince people in fleets to adopt an electric vehicle? If you're enjoying the Automotive Business Podcast, then why not check out our video reviews on business motoring, where we test drive everything from the venerable Range Rover right through to the latest Chinese SUVs, allowing you to make the very best informed decision for your next fleet purchase.
It's been a journey. I'd say most fleets are somewhere in the middle. I think fleet managers generally they want to be on the front foot. They don't want to fall behind. I think something that maybe makes it a little bit more difficult is we had this era of COVID and semiconductor shortages, which has just made the provision of vehicles much less certain. And that gets challenging when you're coming into an uncertain market. So you've already got your drivers that are a little bit apprehensive about moving into an EV. maybe you're apprehensive about providing an EV, and then all of a sudden the manufacturer can't tell you when the next one will be delivered and how much it's going to cost. But generally, once they get into one, and I'm sure you've experienced it, test driving lots of different vehicles, it's generally a more comfortable place to work. It's just much more pleasant driving around in a brand new EV than it is a 10-year-old diesel. And actually, it's safer and it's generally easier to do the job. We, a few years ago, started working with the Harris Group, who import the Maxus electric vehicles. And the way we got working with them is they had a bit of a challenge, which was people were test driving the vehicles and coming back with the analysis that they weren't fit for purpose, but it was really that they needed training on how to drive it. And as a result, now every Maxus vehicle imported into the UK comes with Geotab installed to give that feedback to the driver to help them kind of transition into it.
Your Focus Pro AI dashcam processes data on the device itself. How does this edge computing approach specifically reduce high-risk behaviors like distracted driving or tailgating before an incident even occurs?
It's very similar to the conversation we're having about AI generally. So as a driver, I think historically your line manager, let's say, has been able to interact with you in a very lagged way. You've had an accident, that's a very lagging indicator that you're not a very good driver, or you're doing some things in your driving that need to improve. Now, with the increasing ability of AI and machine vision, and then the computing power to put that at the edge, which essentially means the device in the cab is able to figure out what you should do differently to drive more safely, means that now instead of the scorecard that probably comes up in a performance review at the end of a quarter, which was a very negative process, we're now able to interact with the driver in real time and say, hey, your following distance is too close, that's putting you at risk. We spend a lot of time working with fleets, not on their worst or their riskiest drivers, but actually identifying risk in their best drivers. So the best driver in the fleet, you could argue, is a bigger risk when they're having a bad week. Something's going on at home, suddenly they're not sleeping. And actually, nobody's paying attention to that driver because they're not on the radar of someone that needs to improve their driver behavior. Now you can interact with that driver and also flag within the business that there might be a concern. Maybe there's something serious happening that they haven't told the business about that the business wants to support them with. Geotab recently surveyed a lot of drivers, and drivers are saying that the workplace for them is very stressful. The pressures of the world are kind of getting on top of them a little bit, and they want to feel supported by their employer, which is a big change. I think probably 5 years ago, drivers wouldn't have said, hey, I want my employer to keep more of an eye on me. They probably would have said, oh, big brother, let's do that less. Whereas now we're really seeing a lot of the drivers that we surveyed and a lot of the fleets we work with asking us to help them get more connected, which is interesting. We had a conversation with one of the UK's largest fleets recently and their drivers, where their big problem was the drivers were buying their own cameras on Amazon to help them exonerate themselves and do some of this stuff. But obviously they're just buying a camera. They don't know data privacy, how that data is being managed. I don't think 6 years ago when I joined Geotab, I'd have imagined a driver asking me for more cameras.
Yeah, I was driving a Chinese car the other day and it knew every time I yawned, which is amazing. It really surprised me. It didn't offer me any support, but it said, it knew I was tired. It was a damning indictment of the car I was driving. That's all I can say. But it's a step up from, like, back in the day, you'd have those numbers on the back of vans, wouldn't you, saying, how's my driving? And no one ever in the world is going to ring up and say, I think your driving's fantastic. Well done.
It's what I mean about lagging indicators, right? So now, 10 years ago, to know that your driver was swerving all over the road, they'd either have an accident, or if you were lucky, someone called in and reported that was happening. And obviously there's some negative connotations to that, like monitoring a driver, but actually that driver could have something really serious going on in their life that they need looking after. And the only way you find out is they crash into something as their kind of leadership team. Probably weeks earlier than that now, you can be interacting with that driver and maybe supporting them in some different way.
So many fleets are mixed with various vehicle manufacturers, giving them disjointed information. I think that's fair to say. How is Geotab bringing coherence to all that noise? And what happens to the fleets that refuse to integrate their third-party data sources?
So as we get into artificial intelligence and a world that's increasingly, the expectation is that businesses are using more data. Some of the largest fleets, particularly in the UK, because it's quite a well-established industry for telematics. You can imagine if you've got 50,000 vehicles and you've been operating for 50 years, you get quite disjointed in the data. So Geotab's put a lot of effort into making sure that we have the right people and teams on the ground to help a big fleet figure out how to move if they want to go all singing, all dancing, to get all the right hardware and stuff in the vehicles. And in between that and doing nothing, there's several things that you can do. So one is taking the data that's already in your vehicles and integrating that into a central platform, which we can help with. But then somewhere that we've spent a lot of investment is working with the vehicle manufacturers. So basically every commercial vehicle manufacturer now includes telematics in the vehicle for various reasons. They all do it in slightly different ways because obviously OEMs are designing their vehicles in different ways, and you have the whole vehicle design process, which means that it's a little bit challenging for them to be really on the forefront. But we've spent a lot of time now working with those manufacturers to, one, help advocate for a minimum data quality, which many of them are working towards now and coming on the journey with us, to make it so that data is integrated so our customers can access their Mercedes data, their Ford data, their various different manufacturers, and pull that directly into our system so they have the single pane of glass. So now we have lots of fleets that will have some of our hardware, some hardware that maybe they had installed, and then increasingly as they bring new vehicles onto the fleet, at least starting with the data that their manufacturer can provide. And broadly, the manufacturers are really strong at providing maintenance data, as you'd expect. They designed the engine and they designed the vehicle so they can help with that. And then increasingly, we're seeing them improve the sort of safety-related data that they make available. And so we're able to work with our customers to kind of normalize that, make it all available in AI tools that they have, and bring something together that helps them quickly get the insights that they need to.
When they get all that data in from all the different manufacturers, does that in any way help them with their decision making when it comes to purchasing options? I mean, in the future?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, on a number of different things. So the easiest example would be electric vehicle transition. So we've built a lot of tools over the last sort of 10 years to increasingly helps fleets assess which vehicles could mention. We're arming fleets with very sound data, and Aaron does this, we've monitored him for a whole year. This electric vehicle would never have had this electric vehicle, if he stops, might be definitely covers what he's doing, and it's safer for whatever that might be. And we're taking in a lot of that. So, is that temperature? So if you're in the Scott Islands and, temperatures going up and down in effect. If you're driving up in hills, how far you're driving, lots of different bits of information. And we're increasingly able to do that with the data that the OEM's providing as well. So we've got fleets now that go from no relatively new fleet, and we can immediately turn on telematics data to quickly do it for them, or to get them up and running. Whereas 3 or 4 years ago, that's a really big logistical project to take all the vehicles off the road, install them. Advancing, you can do the same safety program. If you want to get started in safety, there's often a big challenge again with data residency, getting driver buy-in, and all those types of things, which can be difficult if you're saying we need to take every vehicle off the road and install something new. But actually using what the manufacturer gathering data can be a really quick starting point, and you can quickly pilot that and roll it out to the whole fleet.
Data shows that fleets treating EVs as a checkbox see slower returns. How essential is route redesign to actually unlocking the promised total cost of ownership gains for electric trucks and vans?
Essential. I think it's kind of foolish to think that we'll move to a completely new technology and the business in the same way that we were running it before. An electric vehicle be optimized is just optimized in a completely different way. A diesel vehicle, loading it has a different impact on how fast, weather, different impact on it. There's lots of different reasons why you might want to change the routing. I think the easiest example is looking at range. So probably businesses didn't have the challenge of keeping a huge challenge now, but as a route's efficient way to do that. So we're seeing businesses now change their whole routing structure so that, maybe you've got a small electric van that doesn't have a huge range, doing kind of routes in a smaller area, with then bigger electric vans or trucking those long haul journeys. Whereas before, maybe the fleet would have just bought lots of medium-sized vehicles and not really optimize them, and they're all kind of just doing similar.
Is this tech ready for small fleets, or is it exclusive domain for the 500 plus vehicle operators?
No, I'd say if anything, it's more useful for small fleets. So what we're able to do now is, because we have kind of 5 or 6 million vehicles connected, generating hundreds of billions of data a day, we do a lot of benchmarking at Geotab. It's quite core to the way that we're utilizing. And so we can quite accurately predict now that the way you're behaving means that your 12-volt battery is going to fail in the next 3 months, as an example. So obviously for a large fleet, that can save you a lot of money, but a large fleet probably has a relationship with a leasing company and a breakdown provider and all these things. That AJ paints with 5 vehicles, probably when that battery fails, that's a big problem and they miss a lot. But the way I look at that, that's a much bigger impact on that small business, arguably, than it is for...
So how does it work? They have a dashboard and every now and then a thing would flash on one vehicle saying, watch out for this.
So, I'm sure all drivers report back to their business when they get a warning light on their dashboard. So that's like the minimum viable product. So we read those fault codes essentially, and we can report those back. But we're probably 5. And then even things that the battery example, there's no fault code for. This is us creating our own fault code essentially, saying the behavior of that battery looks to us like it's going to break down in 3 months' time, and we're 97% likelihood that that's...
With vehicle theft and data security becoming major concerns, how do innovations like the new last gasp tamper protection in the Geodevice family protect a business' most valuable assets?
Other than it flowing off really easily as a
Who named that? Yeah, that could be your first thing when you go back. You say, we need a name change. Yeah,
you've got to rename. Yeah. So I think increasingly in the world, like, bad actors are more, I used to work in stolen vehicle recovery in a but the professionalism involved in stealing a vehicle or in it is kind of astounding once you get into the detail. So the last gasp is a good example of, if someone wants to take a vehicle now, probably they're expecting there to be a tracker in that vehicle or an asset, a generator or something. And so what they're doing before they go anywhere with it is what's involved, or they're driving around a corner and taking something out. And so that last gasp is essentially just arming the device, so once it's disconnected from the vehicle's power source, it can tell you where it is essentially, and that it's happened, and then unplugged. Well, that could be the alert that tells you your vehicle's being stolen, or your generator's being towed from the side of the road, or your trailer for goods has been, someone's come into the yard and taken.
I'm quite interested in your previous career in stolen vehicle recovery. Does that mean you have in-depth knowledge about how to successfully steal a car?
Maybe.
Yes. If it doesn't work out at Geotab, there's always something to fall back on, Aaron. Okay, let's go for the quick questions. What is the most misunderstood metric in fleet management right now?
Idling, so the fuel spent idling. I think most fleets completely underestimate how much money they spend of just vehicles sat on the side of the road idling.
Will the traditional manual driver logbook be completely extinct by 2028?
Geotab would probably want me to say yes, but having interacted with lots of fleet managers, I think you'd be surprised how many really large fleets are still walking around their vehicle by 2028. I don't think we can get rid of it all. That said, it is easy to...
Okay, if you had a billboard in 5 words or less, what is the future of the connected vehicle?
5 words or less. Having everything connected and using AI.
That was 6, but that's fine. That's fine. I like the way you slipped that in. And Aaron, finally, if you were a car, what car would you be?
Oh, good question. I would be a electric Ford Transit, because it's driving towards the sustainability transition. And it has a great payload.
Geotab, your employers and all those who surround you in your professional life will be thoroughly proud of that answer. Well done. Thank you very much, Aaron, for joining the Automotive Business Podcast. We really appreciate you coming on. You've been listening to the Automotive Business Podcast. For the daily pulse of industry and deeper strategy, make sure you're checking out Motor Trade News and Business Motoring. I'm Adrian Simpson, and we will see you on the next shift from the forecourt to the fleet.